we gradually built software that augmented our own productivity as agents. We knew that Ada was working when we didn't get fired from our jobs. And it was primarily Ada that was responding to customers on our behalf and not us ourselves. It went from being human labor to being AI. And when we revealed that it was Ada, those companies became our first customers.
So for today's podcast, before I introduce my guest, I was doing a little bit of background research. And according to Perplexity, which I think is a pretty reliable source at this point, there's almost 360 million companies in the world. Out of those 360 million, about 4.5 million are startups. And of those 4.5 million startups and 360 million companies, less than 1,500 are unicorns. There's lots of other bigger companies out there, but when it comes to startups, a unicorn is a painfully rare event. And with that, I'd like to introduce the co-founders and CEOs of one of those unicorns, Mike Murchison. Thank you so much for being on the podcast with us today.
Great to be here.
Awesome. So before, just to dive into things, obviously Ada is a huge company at this point. You guys are doing fantastically, but I'd love to hear a little bit about you and what the journey's been so far with Ada, and then we can use that as a jumping off point for more questions.
Sure. So our mission at Ada is to make customer service extraordinary for everyone. And the reason for that is because of those millions of companies that you mentioned, very few of them are actually providing great customer service at scale. The average American and Canadian right now will spend something like 40 days of their lives waiting on hold. That's how shockingly poor the quality of customer service is. And simply put at Ada, our mission is to forever elevate the quality of experience and remove those painful hold times. We started Ada 8 years ago because we encountered the difficulties of scaling customer service firsthand ourselves in a previous quickly growing business. And we've spent a lot of time in the trenches as customer service agents ourselves, understanding just how challenging it is operationally to go from this experience of really avoiding your customers, which is how most businesses relate to their customers at scale, to actually wanting to talk to them. We refer to that as a transition from avoiding customer contact to craving it. And it's our view that in the future, which I think is coming very quickly, the most valuable businesses in the world will offer incredible customer service experiences that actually incentivize people to communicate with them. They'll actually want to hear from you. There's $500 billion invested every year around the world in human-powered contact center experiences. And I think we're going to see a dramatic transition of that spend from human labor towards AI companies like Ada in the years ahead.
Ready to integrate speech AI into your apps? Join over 200,000 developers that are using Assembly AI's speech-to-text API to build their voice-driven products. With just a few lines of code, you can transcribe audio with industry-leading accuracy. Visit assemblyai.com/superhuman to claim $50 in free credits and no credit card required. Awesome. I think that's a great introduction to the company. Obviously, I'm sure you get this question a lot, and I'm sure a lot of folks listening to this have the same question. Ada sounds like, you talked about the dollars shifting from human labor towards more AI when it comes to customer service. I'm sure a lot of folks in customer service are not excited to hear that. How do you see the future for those folks? Are they empowered to do other more important things, or is it just like bad news for them?
No, absolutely. It is. I mean, as a former contact center rep myself, customer service agent myself, what I learned and what we've all experienced is really high attrition rates. Like the average customer service team has an attrition rate of about 50%. And that's because the job is often very mundane and repetitive. But when AI is deployed at scale properly, this reactive, repetitive role becomes one that is far more empowered. In our customers, we see this team evolve from being a very traditional reactive contact center team to an AI management team. Often, this creates new career paths for the top performing customer service agents. They essentially go from responding to a fire hose of angry customers to managing an AI agent that is proactively engaging with customers at scale. And that career path is a really, really exciting one. It's playing out very quickly in the customer service world. And I think it's probably going to play out in every department in the enterprise in the years ahead.
That makes a lot of sense. So my first job when I moved to Canada was in customer service as well. I was sort of working at this coffee distribution. And I don't think anyone who goes into customer service dreams of being in customer service for the rest of their lives. I mean, you might want to get promoted and run the department, but you definitely don't want to be fielding angry questions from customers day in and day out. I mean, I remember my job, it used to be 10 hours a day and just nonstop phone calls from angry customers, because the reality is like customers don't contact you when they're having a nice day or they're loving your product. I mean, they're mostly just contacting you because it's not fun.
That's right.
Right. That being said, it is a decent entry point for a lot of folks who maybe can't find other pathways into the economy.
I think customer service is a super noble profession, and many, many people absolutely love providing customer service. I find a shared sense of empathy and care that customer service leaders and teams experience. We feel a real sense of purpose and pride in helping people solve their problems, from very basic problems to profound ones that are keeping them from showing up at their wedding. So I don't think that the intention is very pure. I think what's changing is how that intention is manifested, how people are actually are expressing this level of empathy and the scale at which they can now help customers.
I totally agree with you. I think freeing people of the drudgery of some of this work is likely going to be a net positive for society in the long term. I want to rewind a little bit. Can you talk a little bit more about how you built the product or how you found your first customers?
So we, as I mentioned, had a different business that was growing quite quickly, and we essentially saw our relationship with our customers change as we grew. We went from knowing all our customers' names to treating them as anonymous numbers that we were trying to keep at bay. And that, I think, simply put, just really, really bothered us because our view is like, hey, the bigger and more valuable our company becomes, the more important our relationship with our customers is, the more valuable it is to learn from them. And so it felt pretty backwards. And so when we saw that, we became very curious. I cold called as many VPs of customer service as I get my hands on, and I asked them, hey, are you talking to your customers more or less as you're growing? And everyone said, well, we're talking to our customers less. And then I said, okay, well, is customer service a cost center or a profit center for you? Oh, it's a cost center. Oh, and by the way, I'm personally compensated to the extent to which I can reduce costs every year. And so something clicked when we heard that maybe the 12th time in a row. And we made the decision to pivot this business into the customer service world. And the evolution, the immediate next step was, we are going to try to focus on learning about this problem and really, really, really ending up in a place, hopefully, where we can confidently say we understand this problem as well or better than anyone else in the world. And what that translated to was us going back to those 12 people and asking if we could join their teams as customer service agents. And 7 of them said yes, and they hired us. And from a dingy office on the east side of Toronto, we worked, David and I both, as contact center reps for 7 different businesses. And those businesses, we became amongst the top performing customer service agents for. Like we hustled, we worked super hard, and we answered a lot of repetitive customer service inquiries. And we gradually built software that augmented our own productivity as agents. We knew that Ada, eventually we called it Ada, was working when we didn't get fired from our jobs. And it was primarily Ada that was responding to customers on our behalf and not us ourselves. And when we revealed that it was Ada, those companies became our first customers. It was a very natural transition from the value we were being provided, we were being paid to provide, which more or less stayed constant. And what changed was just how the value was being delivered. It went from being human labor to being AI.
What has Ada, or what did the team either understand about this problem or figure out about this problem that no one had understood at the time?
Really, Ada is an AI management application. We make it incredibly easy for you to deploy AI into your to your customers in a customer-facing capacity at scale. And we've really, really focused on that feedback loop of making it incredibly easy to manage and improve your AI over time. And I think it's been our experience that, there's been a number of different approaches to applying AI in customer service. This is, not a new or novel idea, but it's been relatively rare to focus on the empowerment of the technology and the control that you are giving a new type of manager. And that focus on AI management it turns out is translated into faster time to value and more value for businesses over time.
So Mike, you're one of maybe 25, 30 unicorns in Canada, a successful business in a space which is massively growing. As you mentioned, the TAM is in hundreds of billions of dollars. Every company which goes through this journey of becoming a unicorn and growing further always has some moments and stories when they're make and break decisions. Love to hear some stories about Ada's make and break journeys as you've kind of started from the scratch when you and David were being customer agents, trying to figure this out to today, what's a massive business.
Yeah, two come to mind. One make or break moment was definitely the original decision to pivot into customer service. And I think the core learning there was it was very empowering for us to just focus on problem mastery. That's how I think about it in retrospect. I think a lot of founders, they tend to focus on development or on product execution in the early days. I think for us, what really paid off was just focusing on how well we understand the problem and making rapid progress around our learning. And it turns out that informed insights that we wouldn't have had otherwise that have subsequently allowed us to build a great product. So I'm very that was a big make or break moment. It wasn't obvious to make it at the time. The second one is more recent. We've been leveraging language models at Ada really since they ever existed. Like the AI managers that live in our software, we initially were applying some of the earliest language models to improve their productivity. But the core engine of Ada was an NLU-based engine. We focused very deeply on language classification. And when we saw the performance of language models cross a threshold, which occurred around GPT 3.5 and ChatGPT, we made a bold decision to re-architect our core engine entirely around language models, which at the time was non-obvious because in customer service, there's such a value placed on determinism. And when you have a fundamentally probabilistic system, which language models inherently are, it risks eroding trust and removing that determinism that businesses value. That bet was non-obvious. It was very challenging for us to do technically, and it was a bold decision for us to essentially build a brand new product from scratch. I'm so happy we made it because we are very much at the frontier of applied AI, and our new product is growing faster than anything we ever built before. And so that was also non-obvious. It's a hard decision to make. We went through a lot of pain as a company technically and operationally to make that happen, to stay focused on building the most cutting edge product in customer service AI possible. And I'm really thankful we did.
Now, re-architecting a product is always super tough. So maybe just double clicking on that, what were 2 or 3 data points which got you over the hump to be hey, let's do this? Or was this a group decision? It was hey, you making the final call? How did you kind of do that, right? Because as you look back, you're hey, that's awesome, I made the decision. But I think in the moment, especially as founders, they always struggle. Hey, do I just pull the trigger? Do I not pull the trigger? What do I do? Do I rely on my investors? Do I rely on my executive team? Who do I rely on here?
The reason we made the decision, the data points we saw were really informed by our own use of language models. It just became, so clear that we can power a level of experience that really accelerates our progress against building AI that's as capable as a human agent. And we saw that both with the quality of the experience that we were capable of having, the conversational nature of it, to the reduced effort it takes for the AI manager to actually manage content, manage what the agent actually knows. And so it ultimately was like I'm of the belief that like if you have perfect information, like it's easy to make a decision and you're too late. We didn't have perfect information. We had a little bit of data that showed, hey, we think this experience could be a lot better. We had some data on, the scaling laws that we believed in, that the depth of reasoning and the quality of language model performance is going to continue to increase at a rate that catches people by surprise. So we tried to really think about, anchor ourselves in years ahead. What are these models going to be capable of? Let's build for the future, not the capabilities today. And then finally, like we really focused on value in our experiments in our early reasoning engine. We started to see that we could resolve more than twice the number of conversations we were capable of powering in our previous generation. That's actually conservative. We now have customers who are automatically resolving 80%, 85%. I think I saw most recently of all customer conversations. That just would not have been possible, at least with the quality, had we not made that call.
Are you thinking about adding speech AI to your product? Join over 200,000 developers and product leaders that are using Assembly AI's speech-to-text API with industry-leading accuracy and low latency. From podcasts to meetings, Assembly AI delivers fast and reliable transcriptions with just a few lines of code. Head over to assemblyai.com/superhuman to claim $50 in free credits so you can try it for yourself. No credit card required.
So just talking a bit more about the product, right? Like I think voice models have become another big area. Recently, obviously, OpenAI has come out with their Whisper model, and there are other companies who are also experimenting in this space. But still, there's no like big winner. There's no like, like, hey, this is going to be massive. Obviously, you guys, I assume, are experimenting with this. What are your thoughts in this space? Are you guys utilizing some model, building something in-house?
Yeah. So the way our reasoning engine works is, which is channel agnostic, by the way. You can build and deploy and manage an AI agent with Ada in any channel, whether it's voice, SMS, social, chat, email we launched recently, and in any language. Essentially, our reasoning engine is an ensemble of anywhere between 5 and I think now it's about 9 different language models, which work together to resolve a customer's inquiry. And depending on the complexity of that inquiry, depending on the channel that inquiry is living in, depending on a variety of factors, all 9 of those models might be used, or only a handful of them will be used. But because of that architecture, we are incentivized and are capable of accessing, of really solving for the highest quality intelligence that's available in market and making sure we're always providing that to our customers. You mentioned voice AI, like it's probably most visceral in voice AI because everyone can understand the experience between using, ChatGPT, like standard voice mode and advanced voice mode. It's just like, it's amazing. The ability to barge in, the ability to have a conversation that really truly crosses the uncanny valley. All of these things are made possible in production because you're tapping into the most capable intelligence available, which as the three of us know, like that's changing
rapidly,
daily.
Yeah, it's insane like how fast things have changed even in the last like 3 to 6 months. So it's a very interesting time, as you said, like to build but also anxiety producing. So as a CEO of a $1 billion company, what do you think is your unfair advantage, right? Because I think there are a lot of smart founders, there are a lot of smart builders. Not everyone kind of ends up building a profitable business, not ends up building like a massive business. Because as other founders who are listening to this podcast, I think will be very curious to know what are things they should be honing, they should be trying to develop, or maybe something is natural, which has worked really well for you, which has allowed you to be successful.
I do feel that Ada is very early in our journey still. So I don't. While we may have achieved a couple milestones, like our ambition is to build a generational company that truly makes customer service extraordinary for everyone. That means billions of people around the world. I'd say en route to this, the stuff that has been most valuable, I don't know if it's an unfair advantage, but it is one that we focus on, is just our rate of learning. And I think every founder can think about their business's growth through that lens. How quickly are you growing personally as a leader? And it's been my experience that often the business's growth is a reflection of its founder's personal growth. Part of it comes from making tough decisions that push you into new spaces that very few people can consult you on because no one's been there before. And part of it comes from exercising an ambition muscle where you're continually pushing yourself to be more ambitious. I journal a lot to myself. I think I have a diary that goes back like 12 years, digital diary. And I do this exercise where every year, at least once a year, I will read through my previous entries, concentrating usually in the last year, but I'll often go back and pick random entries from many years prior. And if I don't recognize that person, I'm like, what was this person thinking? It usually means that my rate of learning is pretty good. It's pretty steep. But if I look back and I see something where like, man, that is, I'm exactly the same way today. That's the anti pattern. And so I've learned that like having a dialogue with myself has allowed me to think much more deeply through problems, and has really been a source of like comfort and strength for me over the years. Usually is correlated with how stressed I am. If I'm like really stressed out, I'll probably write more.
That's cool. What's your preferred, LLM or AI app at the moment for personal use, not for business stuff?
I mean, I talk to ChatGPT every day. That could be everything from, working, again, it's almost like an externalized journal, like working through a problem I'm thinking about, to learning something new about something around me.
Yeah.
So that's one. Two is Perplexity. Like I love Perplexity.
I love it. So good. Yeah.
I don't know anyone who doesn't. Everyone who uses Perplexity seems to rave about it. I'm no different.
Cool. Has there been anything unexpected, interesting, or surprising that you found in your use? I mean, I'm assuming you probably only had access for a couple of months at this point, but maybe that's enough of a sample.
Yeah, I continue to learn a bunch. I think what's been surprising, maybe less so in retrospect, but at the time, was just what a difference latency makes in usage. Like the difference between a 4-second latency in voice and a 1-second latency is so profoundly different that it just creates a completely different relation. It may as well just be a completely different technology, completely different relationship with it. So that's one. Related to might be the ability to interrupt, the barge in capabilities. Similarly, just a game changer, a completely different product. The second that you don't have to wait and listen to a rambly agent that you don't want to listen to. It just creates a fundamentally different experience.
Yeah.
So that's two. And then I think third has been I'm continually reminded that to get the most value out of AI right now, I think it's really important to blame yourself when the technology fails. Because usually it's the case that you haven't prompted effectively, you haven't been clear enough in your instructions. And I find that that's a dominant strategy because if you assume you're at fault, you're more likely to be at pushing the frontier of this technology. Yeah. Whereas if you just settle and assume that technology is not there yet, you probably end up late.
Yeah, so I was just kind of wondering, right? Like, there's all these interesting personal use cases, but are there any sort of like weird or quirky use cases that you're experimenting with at work at the moment?
Yeah, we've got a lot of experiments running around, where and how to apply AI. Some of them are really basic that have worked super well. Like, we have an internal agent at Ada that is our brand ambassador. So, anytime you want to write something, any copy, any blog post or anything, our brand guidelines and our style and tone of voice is like owned by this AI brand ambassador inside Ada. That's been pretty effective. I think there's honestly so much value still to be unlocked by just getting the workflow of meeting transcription and analysis down. There's just so much productivity to be unlocked simply by making sure inside your company, every internal meeting is recorded, transcribed, and run through an LLM. And I think there's, most companies are early days of really figuring out how to do that well effectively. So that's two we continue to work on. We continue to work on that. Yeah. And then third is we have a culture of people just regularly experimenting and doing weird shit with AI all the time. So we try to just celebrate folks who are trying out new things and kind of pushing the boundaries. And most of those fail as they should. But every once in a while you see one that's wow, I'm going to borrow that. I'm going to use it myself, and hopefully it's valuable for our customers too.
How much hallucination are you seeing in models at this point, or what you guys are building at Ada? And are you seeing the rate of hallucinations go down at this point, or do you feel like this is a significant technical problem that still needs a major solution?
Yes, we are. It is a very major technical problem. It's one of the core focuses of our reasoning engine. A core to our architecture is a focus on ensuring that every generation we power, every message we power is relevant and accurate and safe. That's actually our specific measure of a resolution. It has to be relevant, has to be accurate, has to be safe, and doesn't involve a human agent. We're not at 0% yet. No one is. And I think it's here where you start to bump up against the point of comparison. And we see this a lot in the customer service world. It turns out that humans aren't at 0%. It's actually very challenging to build a customer experience team at scale in which everyone is giving consistent answers. And so I think we'll start to see more and more of these points of comparison emerge as AI becomes more and more widely adopted, where we start to actually change our challenge our benchmarks. And it's not to say that 0% isn't achievable. I think we will get there. But we also, I think it's also important to contextualize, where we are today, agnostic of the technology.
So obviously, you most probably spend most of your time thinking about Ada and the problems, trying to figure out building the company and scaling it. What are you seeing generally in the AI market, right? There's a lot of, as we kind of talked about earlier in the conversation, there's a lot of opportunity to build. There's a lot of volatility as well. Where are some opportunities for audience, especially who are founders who are listening, hey, what should I be focusing on? What should I be building?
Yeah, I think there are probably few moments in history that are more exciting to build than right now. And I think the way I think about that, the reason that's the case is because intelligence is no longer only biological. So the very nature of what software is changing. Software used to be mainly about providing a digital interface for humans to collaborate through, where the core unit of work was mainly being provided by the human. And now we're moving to a world in which the software is doing the work. The unit of labor is literally inference now. It's no longer human cognition. And there's just, I think the way to think about the opportunities of AI in the enterprise, at least speaking from an enterprise software perspective, is literally to just look at a business's OpEx and pick an item and attack it with AI. And I think we're going to see a very different type of operational efficiency emerge in the next decade. Top performing companies, publicly traded companies, by virtue of that. The fundamental nature of OpEx is changing. And that just creates just such ample opportunity for founders right now who are interested in building large software businesses. So that's how I'd think about it. And it's it's not to say that like there's not going to be people in companies. I certainly don't believe that, but it does mean that the nature of work is forever changing in front of us.
Yeah.
And so much of the value that's being created by what we call software today is actually being driven by humans.
Yeah.
And that is changing.
Yeah, the outcomes are being driven now by agents or whatever the next few months, like these interfaces would be called.
I think software definitely has made companies smaller because you just need fewer people to do the same thing. I think classic example, Instagram listed 15 employees, sold for $1 billion. But I think the flip side is it did actually enable more company creation, right? I mean, someone like me probably wouldn't be an entrepreneur unless I could have just sat at home and started a business from my laptop. And I think that's probably true for a lot of folks out there. And think with AI, right? Like you just get more leverage.
Yeah, completely agree. I think that is a consequence of the exact same trend. Like think about the OpEx that was required to create a business.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just fundamentally different now. You probably don't need a 5-person engineering team or whatever you think you do. And I think that's a continuation of a trend that existed pre-AI. If you started an internet company in 1990, you also needed way more people than you needed in the year 2010. But I think it's a steeper curve. Like where the difference is much starker between
AWS era from like servers to AWS to like what it is now. I think like the cost is significantly going down. Like I just so true.
Exactly. And I think that does create, to your point, Zain, like there's probably gonna be way more small companies that are doing 10, 20 million in revenue. And I think that creates I think it's an exciting time to be a bootstrapped entrepreneur. But similarly, I also think we're going to see companies that are way bigger than we've ever seen before. And the idea of like $100 million ARR company, which we all celebrate today, like that won't be that impressive. The idea of $1 trillion technology company won't be limited to 3 or 4 companies.
So Mike, like we talked about the scale, talked about like this massive opportunity which is in front of us, and for operational efficiency in companies, which industries, in your opinion, would be like the early adopters, or maybe they're like first movers?
Anywhere where work is repetitive and costs are high, those industries are likely to be, among the first adopters of AI. And you can see that with customer service. The average business, depending on where they're located, will spend, call it $10 to respond to a customer. And now they can do it for a couple cents. And so that's a good example of that. There's a reason why SWE agents, like software engineering agents, are such an early use case of AI. Why? Because so much of coding is repetitive, and the cost of labor is extremely high. On that dimension, there's folks can probably think of a bunch of other areas where we'll see AI applied. It's only a matter of time before we won't even think in terms of AI. Like in the same way we don't think in terms of like software companies or internet companies. Right, companies delineate themselves in the early days of a new technological wave, but then eventually if you're a business, you're a web company. Of course, you have a presence. Same thing will be true with AI. Like every business will be an AI company. It'll be weird at some point to not be.
Yeah, no, I think like that makes sense, right? Like cost, friction, all these things. How can you remove them? So, what advice would you have for founders who are starting now? Like, hey, what are 3 things they should be keeping in mind? Like, I think rate of learning you mentioned earlier, which is like very critical. Let's look at the OpEx stuff from a tangible perspective, cost. Any other things which you think a lot of first-time founders might not be thinking about, like they should be thinking about?
Yeah, I think absolutely focus on your rate of learning. 2, focus on problem mastery. A lot of first-time founders question, like, what's my competitive edge? What can I do differently than anyone else? What you can do and what you have complete control over is you can understand this problem better than anyone else in the world. So figure out how to understand this problem better than anyone else in the world. And then 3rd, where my bias is I would encourage you to just completely immerse yourself in AI. Yeah. Expect when your AI tool of choice is failing that it's your fault, and keep yourself at the frontier of this incredible pace of change. And if you do that and those 2 other things, I think you're well situated to build something pretty valuable.
That's it for today. Thanks for joining us, and please subscribe so you don't miss another episode. Take care. Bye-bye.